Welcome back, everyone. Today I have with me John Kiriakou, former CIA officer, and we'll be talking a lot about CIA. Welcome, John.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
And we'll jump right into it. My biggest question is, and you talked about this, technology, right? And CIA is using technology to basically up their game. But has the whole CIA work become harder because of technology? Because adversaries have it too now, or has it become easier since they can use it?
No, I think it's most definitely become harder. I was just talking to a friend about this yesterday, asking, how do CIA officers cross borders now? How do you get through airports with facial recognition software? It's almost impossible. So yeah, while the CIA's technology is getting better, and the CIA has access to great technology through, for example, Palantir, that it has invested heavily in, I honestly don't know how they're able to counter new technology that's being used by foreign countries.
For sure. And since you're talking about facial recognition, did you know 50% of world's CCTV cameras are in China alone? And I want to talk about it because I'm guessing China is probably, hopefully, it is a big focus for CIA. Do you know anything about how CIA operates in China? What kind of challenges they face?
Not specifically. I can give you 35-year-old information where we were taught that the Chinese intelligence service was so good and so enormous that instead of doing a 2-hour or 3-hour long surveillance detection route, oftentimes officers would have to do an 8-hour long surveillance detection route. Can you imagine that? Driving around for 8 hours on a very well-planned, pre-planned route to do a meeting that might last 5 minutes or that might last another 2 hours, and then doing another 8 hours to get back to your home or back to your office. It's onerous.
Yeah, that is insane. Okay, so I don't know if you saw this when Trump administration came in after the election. They posted a couple of videos or like clips. I'm guessing these were advertisements in China, where basically it was like ads to, hey, if you're part of the party, you can come and give us information. We'll pay you. We'll bring you to the United States. I've never seen anything like that publicly. Like, what's the goal of posting that publicly?
Oh, yeah. The goal is severalfold. The goal is not necessarily to recruit somebody. I mean, that would be a goal, but the real goal is just to panic the other side and to force them to spend money to counter what it is that you're trying to accomplish by trying to recruit their people. Like, for example, just a week ago, the British government announced that it was going to have a presence on the dark web. Okay, so why would they need to be on the dark web? Because they're specifically trying to recruit Russians. So what they do is, just to be jerks about it, they say, we're going to go on the dark web and we're going to try to recruit Russians. And so now the Russians are like, now we have to try to counter what it is that the British are going to do to try to recruit our people. So money that would have been spent, let's say, trying to recruit Americans or British or Germans or whatever, has to be spent trying to make sure that the Americans, the British, the Germans can't recruit their people. It's this constant game that's played.
It's like a war strategy, counter strategy, then counter to the counter.
Oh, very much so.
Okay, I'm confused a bit. Why did they have to announce that? I guess it makes sense. They want the other side spending money.
Propaganda. Yeah, propaganda. And there's the outside chance that there's going to be some Russian general or some Russian scientist or some guy who works in Putin's office or whatever saying, aha, you know what? I think I will look for the British on the dark web and then volunteer to be a spy for MI6.
I'm guessing that's rare. Volunteers, that's like dream come true.
It happens every single day. Every single day. In fact, they told us in training that the best sources the CIA ever had in its history came from volunteers. And I'll explain why. It's because as a CIA officer, you don't know that this guy John Smith exists, right? Because he works so deep, let's say, in the Russian military's nuclear weapons program, that he would never come to your attention. You would never have any opportunity to meet him. He's not gonna be at a diplomatic cocktail party that you're invited to, for example, right? He doesn't have access to Westerners on purpose. So when he volunteers, man, that's an opportunity for you to make the best recruitment of your career.
Okay, you say he doesn't have access to Westerners on purpose. What does that mean? Like the Russian government doesn't want him having access or any contact with any Westerners?
Correct. And also, just because he's not a diplomat, let's say, he's not going to be invited to that, ambassador's dinner that you're invited to. He's just a guy. For example, in Washington, I get invited to a lot of dinners, right? Foreign embassies have these dinners. And so you put on a suit, you go to the dinner. You see the same people every time. You see the guy from the British embassy, you see the guy from the French embassy, you see the Ethiopian ambassador, you see the Turkish ambassador. It's all the same people. You're not going to see the head of nuclear weapons at the Pentagon. He's not invited. They don't even know he exists. They don't know his name. They don't know how to get in touch with him. And so those people, if they're disgruntled, if they hate their bosses, if there's something that bothers them that might make them recruitable, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't have access to it. You and I just met, okay? And let's say I go to, there's an open house at the British Embassy tonight. I wouldn't expect to see you there because you don't have regular daily contact with diplomats or with that world. And so if you've just been passed over for promotion and you hate your boss and you're mad and you want to get back at him and you want to do that by contacting a CIA officer, you're not going to be able to do it at the British Embassy's open house. You're going to have to physically walk into an American embassy and say, my name is John Smith and I'm in charge of the Russian military's nuclear program. And I want to work for the CIA.
Another thing we have heard a lot about, and I wanted to get your thoughts on, is we see memes about this, where if you're in Washington, especially if you got like a government badge around your neck, you go to a bar, you'll see like a lot of Chinese women, Chinese girls just buy you drinks. Is that true? Is that meme? I haven't been to DC, but it's a lot of people. Because we joke about geopolitics jokes too, where like the young guys just joke about like, I'm just going to walk around with a fake badge just to get free drinks and free numbers.
Especially if your fake badge says like FBI or Department of Homeland Security or something like that. White House Situation Room. You could probably get those at Spencer's Gifts. So, yeah, that's true. Yes. On a more serious note, we are taught at the CIA from quite literally from your very first day, to take your badge off the minute you walk through the door. And it becomes like a normal part of your routine. You don't even think about it. You take the badge off and you stick it in your pocket. For the very reason that you cited, that, look at it this way, Washington has more spies than any other place on the planet. Okay? The FBI estimates that there are as many as 10,000 spies in Washington right now as we're having this conversation. So you've got to be crazy
quickly.
careful.
That's not including our people, right? That's
not
just
including
foreign.
our people. Yeah, not
that's
including
insane.
our people. That's right. Yeah, it's insane. And so you got to be very, very careful, because just like you get promoted by making recruitments, that's how the other guys get promoted too. That's the only way they get promoted, by making recruitments. And so, yeah, you've got to protect yourself. Absolutely.
That makes sense. Now, another interesting thing, since we talked about Russia a little bit, you have said it like, any intelligence agency actually can work with any intelligence agency. And
Any
I think you
intelligence.
bring up, yeah, as long as the interests align. Now, this is
Eh,
where like we follow Russia very closely since the Ukraine war has been going on, and there was an
yes.
interesting point where last year I think there was a terrorist attack inside Russia. I think it was
Yes.
ISIS K or ISIS A, something like that.
Correct.
And I
Yes.
noticed these reports always come out. I don't know if it's always, but a lot of times I see the reports where like, oh, FBI warned them, and like
Yeah.
this other agency warned them, but they didn't believe us. Those warnings, is that like actually happening, or is it like one of those
Yeah.
warnings where like we're warning them every week, and that's why
No.
they're not listening? Or
No,
something? Okay.
we actually have a law in the United States called the duty to warn law. And so if we develop information saying that a country is going to be attacked, or not even just a country, but if an individual is going to be attacked, we have to warn that person by law that they're subject to an attack. So it's kind of one of those things that's strange, or that may sound strange. And I'll give you an example. I was tracking a terrorist in Greece. This is 25 years ago. I was tracking a terrorist in Greece, and I was like, man, I'd really love to recruit this guy, but he's probably not recruitable. You know, I'm going to try my best. And then I was like, maybe it's not worth my time, and I'm just not sure what I'm doing here. So then I have another source tell me, you know, this guy, and he didn't know I was tracking the guy, but he said the first guy, he has been running his mouth, and the bad guys are thinking maybe it's time they take him out. And I said, take him out, kill him? They're going to kill him? And he said, yeah, they're talking about it. So I went back and I reported it. I said, hey, you know, I've been thinking about pitching this guy, but then I decided, maybe not. But then my other source is saying that the bad guys are going to kill the first guy. They said, duty to warn. So on a Sunday morning, I knew he would be there. I went with a colleague of mine. We banged real hard on his door, scared the hell out of him, woke him up, and I said, listen, I am from the CIA in Washington, and this group that you dedicated your life to serving, they're going to kill you. They're planning to kill you. He's like, bullshit, fuck you, get the fuck out. I'm like, okay, you've been warned. And then I left it at that. And they didn't kill him. They absolutely intended to, but he ended up dying. As it turned out, the reason why he was so like disgruntled is because he had been diagnosed with cancer and he hadn't told anybody yet. And he was like, they've always disrespected me, and I should have gotten better assignments. And he was just mad. That's all it came down to. But I warned him. They're going to kill you.
So you talk about him being bad, and then you said maybe you can't recruit him. But usually that's like a good sign, right? Like if someone is mad about their job, it's a good
Yes.
person to recruit.
That's
and
a very
what
good.
makes
That's a very good sign. Yes. Most people. I just said this yesterday in a talk that I gave at a university. Most people allow themselves to be recruited for the money. It's a cash transaction. They're doing it only for the money, not for any other reason. And that's fine. You know, in most cases, we don't really care what the motivation is, just so long as they do it and they're honest about it. So, but that leaves 5%. If 95% are doing it for money, what about the other 5%? So the other 5% are doing it because they're angry, because they've been passed over for promotion, because their boss is a dick who disrespected them, because they love the United States. Believe it or not, that sometimes is the case. Sometimes it's because, as crazy as this sounds, it's because they love James Bond movies, they love the Jason Bourne movies, and they want a piece of the action. It's just exciting to them. And so your job is to figure out what the motivation is. Oftentimes they won't tell you. Oftentimes they're not even sure of it themselves. and just make sure that they're happy. Once they say yes, they need to provide you the information in order to keep the relationship going. They need to provide you the information that they initially set out to provide you, and then you just take it from there.
The guy you talked about, actually, he was not recruitable. What
No.
makes someone not recruitable? How do you judge that?
There are a couple things that make a person not recruitable. One is that they have no vulnerability. A vulnerability is anything at all, good or bad, that may make them accept your pitch. Let's say you make $10,000 a year working for your intelligence service, and your kid has cancer. Okay, your kid's gonna die. You live in this shithole country. There's like C-list treatment for your kid, but you love your kid. He's your kid. I can get your kid into the Mayo Clinic and get him the best cancer treatment in the world if you give me 2 hours in your code room with an NSA officer. Okay, that's a vulnerability. Another vulnerability is you're a degenerate gambler and you're deeply in debt. Maybe even your wife doesn't even know that you're a degenerate gambler, and you need cash and you need it now because you got to pay back the debt, or this guy down the street is going to break your legs for not paying him back. I can take care of that debt if you do everything I tell you to do. Another thing is you just you love your family and you don't make enough money to send your kid to a good college. In fact, your daughter, you're probably going to have to marry her off to some asshole that you don't like just because you can't afford to keep her in the house. Not a problem. I'll put all your kids through college in the United States. I'll give them opportunities that they've never even dreamed of. So a lot of different things can be a vulnerability. But then you run into somebody like for example, you meet, let's say, you meet a Cuban diplomat at a cocktail party. Okay, Cubans are great targets. They're tough targets. So you invite the guy to lunch. You're not allowed to really have lunch with a Cuban if you're a State Department officer, but you're not really a State Department officer, so you have a discreet lunch. And then you have dinner after that. Maybe you bump into him, at the beach or whatever. But you realize he likes his job. He loves his country. He's not married. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't like the United States. He's not vulnerable. And so you say, okay, well, buddy, it was nice to meet you. And then you shake hands and you move on to the next target.
How do you even invite someone like that to a job? Like, what's your not job, lunch? Like, what's your excuse? Because it seems like you shouldn't be having lunch. So how do you convince him? Hey, come, we'll talk about something.
Well, if we're talking about a Cuban specifically, or a North Korean, where you're not supposed to have any contact with those people, yeah, it's tough. You gotta do it on the QT. What you do that's easier is you accidentally bump into them somewhere. I mean, really, you've been following them for weeks, so you know what their patterns are. And then you accidentally bump into them at, the Starbucks, or if they're Russian or Ukrainian or Georgian or whatever, you bump into them at church, right? You just go to church and pretend you're, their religion, whatever. If it's anybody else, the Russian, the Chinese, anybody else, you're going to bump into them at diplomatic functions, cocktail parties, meetings, and then you strike up a conversation like, hey, how about that soccer game yesterday? Oh my God, I love that one guy, the striker, he's so great. And then, hey, you seem like such a fun guy, let's have lunch. And they always say yes. Because it's their job. Remember, they're diplomats. So it's their job to liaise with you.
That makes sense. Now, we want to get to Iraq. I'm really excited about this, but since we bring it up, the Russians it's confusing because just based on my research, it's like everyone, especially if they're here in the United States, they're loaded, especially if they're a diplomat, right? Like just the way the society and
Absolutely
the
not.
government is. That's not true. Okay.
Absolutely not. No.
I'm guessing the diplomatic mission has a lot more people than I know about. Maybe that's the mistake, right? Like we know the top guy, maybe the secondary guy at the mission,
Yeah.
but there are probably
Right.
a lot more behind them who have information, but they don't have money.
Correct. We tend to compare what others make to what we make. And we sort of trick ourselves sometimes into thinking that they're doing as well as we are. Like if you go to the CIA today, you're going to start at the junior most level, entry level, you're going to start at like 105,000, right? That's pretty good. If you're overseas, you're going to make the 105,000 plus post differential, plus language pay, plus danger pay, plus overtime, plus. So you're making a really good living, and you don't pay rent. You don't pay. The only thing I paid overseas was food. That was it. Nothing else. So it's not the same for foreign diplomats in Washington necessarily. The British embassy, they make a shitload of money. Yeah, the French, the Germans, the Dutch, the this, the that, but we don't spy on them. They're our friends. Yeah, the Five Eyes and most closely allied countries. We don't have any interest at all in what the Dutch are doing or what, the Norwegians are doing. They're all friends of ours, so we don't mess with them. But the Russian third secretary has to live in a little apartment in Southwest Washington because he only makes 30 grand a year. And Washington's an expensive place to live. And so you can try to make hay out of that. Now, it's going to be more difficult in Washington because the CIA has primacy overseas. The FBI has primacy in the United States. So it's going to be the FBI to pitch this guy. And then when he goes back to Moscow, they turn him over to the CIA. But let's not even think about the Russians. Let's think about the Eritreans. Okay, Eritrea was once described to me at the CIA as the North Korea of Africa. So we're interested in the Eritreans. Why? Because they're constantly in a state of war with the Ethiopians, and the Ethiopians are friends of ours. Right? So we want to collect on the Eritreans. So is it hard or is it easy to recruit an Eritrean? Are you kidding? You're going to end up having to turn away Eritreans because they all want to volunteer to be CIA informants. Because they make $1,000 a month. They live in some shithole apartment in a terrible neighborhood. They can't afford to buy food. It's just, it's a matter of survival.
Okay, perfect. Now let's get to Middle East. Just from my research, it seems like you started in CIA in 1990.
Yes,
That was before the Kuwait War, right?
Oh yeah. The Kuwait War made me a star. Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I was, I joined in on January the 6th, 1990, and went through the training. Went through the period they call it the read-in period, and then I was assigned to Iraq and Kuwait, and just as I felt like I knew what I was doing, Iraq invaded Kuwait.
Did we know something was coming?
Yeah,
or was it like a surprise?
We told the Kuwaitis on June the 30th, the Iraqis are going to invade, and they said, "You guys are nuts. They may cross the border, take this little 2-kilometer strip of an oil field, but they're like, no, you're overreacting." The Kuwaitis didn't really trust us back then because Kuwait was a non-aligned country, and they just thought, well, the Americans, they're trying to wiggle their way in, and the Iraqis aren't gonna invade. The Iraqis told us they wouldn't invade. June 30th. August 2nd, the Iraqis invade. They take the entire country. The royal family runs to Saudi Arabia to save themselves, and the Gulf War begins. So on that morning, August the 2nd, 1990, just as I felt like I knew what I was doing, like I really knew I was an expert, you know? And I had a degree in Middle Eastern studies and the whole 9 yards. So I went to the office early that day, as you might imagine. And my boss said, "Don't take your jacket off. We're going to the White House." And I had never been to the White House before, except as a tourist. So we go to the White House. There's a Marine waiting for us. And he takes us to the Oval Office. And it's the president, the vice president, the national security advisor, the director of the CIA, my boss, and me. So, we're standing there. You stand until the president sits. So finally the president sits down and he says, "Gentlemen, please sit." So we all sit and he goes, "Well, now what do we do?" And everybody turned and looked at me. I was 25 years old. And it took me a beat. And I said, "Well," I got my bearings. I said, "Well, Mr. President, as you know, the Iraqis crossed the border at 0200. They invaded Kuwait. They took the entire country. Most of the royal family fled to Saudi Arabia. The emir's fourth brother was killed in a shootout with Iraqi troops. Blah, 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 blah." And so the vice president says, "Do we know who's running the country now?" And I said, "Yes, sir, we do. He's a Kuwaiti doctor by the name of Ahmed Khatib." He said, "Do we know anything about him?" And I said, "He got a medical degree from the American University of Beirut, where his roommate was George Habash, and together they founded the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine." And the vice president says, "Jesus Christ," like that. And then the president said, "Guys, I have a lot to do." And we got up and we walked out. And my boss said, "It's going to be a hell of a day today." And so later that afternoon, we learned later, Margaret Thatcher called him. Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And she said something that's become famous because the president truly didn't know what to do. And she said, "Now's not the time to go wobbly, George." And he said, "You're right." Well, the conventional wisdom at the time was the Persian Gulf was too shallow to accommodate an aircraft carrier. We had never tried to put one in the Gulf. It was too shallow. 3 months later, we had 6 aircraft carrier battle groups inside the Persian Gulf, and the rest is history.
No, that is insane. How I don't know if you can even talk about that. How far up did we have spies in the Iraqi government? Because Saddam was always very paranoid about. I just read his book, and it's like every few months he was just like cleaning house in his government, and the excuse was they're working for the Americans.
Yeah, cleaning house by shooting people in the brain.
Yeah, I should.
Yeah. I can't say specifically because it's still classified, but I'll say we did not have any problem collecting intelligence from the Iraqi leadership. The thing is you can only shoot or threaten to shoot so many people when they finally come to you for protection. Like Saddam, "I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to shoot you." At least one of them is going to run to the Americans and say, "Please help me." And then we say, "Sure, we'll help you. But what you're going to do first for us is you're going to go back and you're going to collect X, Y, and Z."
Which I guess their value is being part of the government, right? If they want to defect, that kind of
Right.
kills the value. Yeah.
Exactly. That kills the value because then they can't collect current information. I don't want to know what happened a month ago. I want to know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Okay, makes sense. Now, other thing is like after the Kuwait War, President Bush was like very confident that Saddam was going to fall. And then I think from what I read, it was like it wasn't happening. So maybe it was Bush or maybe it was Clinton who was like, "Okay, we got to do something to make sure he falls." Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. That didn't happen?
No. Bush made... You can take this one way or the other. There was great disagreement about it in the CIA. I remember there were like a dozen of us standing around a TV set watching President Bush, the first President Bush, declare an end to hostilities. And we were like, an end to what? You're doing what? Like, we have him on the run. We could be in Baghdad in 3 days. What are you doing? But he said that Hosni Mubarak, who was the president of Egypt, and at the time Hafez al-Assad, the president of Syria, said that if we continued on to Baghdad and tried to overthrow Saddam, they would drop out of the alliance, which would have been really bad for our foreign relations. And so we decided, well, Bush decided that he's just going to end it. He's going to end it all, right? We're just going to stop. At the CIA, we believed that was a terrible mistake because this was a chance to overthrow Saddam and to replace him with, we were confident, would be a Sunni Muslim junta of military leaders. Right? We didn't want a Shia Muslim to take over Iraq because they would be allied with Iran, which is exactly what happened, thanks to George W. Bush, and the idiots that he surrounded himself with. And so what Bush ended up doing was declaring a no-fly zone in the South to protect the Shia Muslims from attacks. The problem is, what we ordered the Iraqis to do was to not fly fixed-wing aircraft. And they said, fine, no problem. So what they started doing is shooting Shias from helicopters. Those aren't fixed-wing, right? So then we had to go in and start shooting down helicopters, and then the Kurds said, what about us? And we had to make a no-fly zone in the north, and then Bush lost to Clinton, and Clinton didn't give a shit about foreign affairs, and so Iraq was kind of an afterthought with him, and at the CIA, we're like, what's going on? This is we could be doing this for the next 20 years. In fact, we did it for the next, almost 30 years. But it was just a mess because there wasn't any clear policy. There wasn't a clear long-term policy. We just didn't have a plan for what to do over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And the Iraqis knew they could outweight us.
Okay, so a couple of interesting points. Since you bring up the Shia-Sunni divide in Iraq, which is interesting because I guess based on the comments, seems like CIA knew about that back in the 90s, which makes sense, right? Middle Eastern studies.
Everybody in the world knew about it.
Well, that's what. Based on some reports, it seems like President W. Bush, he did not knew about it until after Saddam fell, where he was like, "Oh, I didn't know. I thought it was all Muslims."
No, that's not true. No.
Okay, so yeah, with media, it's tough. We don't know which report is true, which is not.
No, that's absolutely positive. You'd have to be fucking retarded to not know there are Shias and Sunnis in Iraq. You're the president of the United States.
Which makes sense. Another important point is, which I know you said Clinton did not care about foreign affairs, but there was, in 96, we had a very, based on the reading, right? We had a very strongest attempt of coup against Saddam. Do you know anything about that? Where I think his son found the walkie-talkie or communication device. That's how they took out like the whole organization CIA was working with. Okay. No. Oh, not true? Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I should have more details with what the organization was, because I know we were working with a couple of Iraqi organizations inside Iraq, right? They're just trying to see what happens.
That was the problem. We were working with Iraqi organizations outside of Iraq.
Yeah.
And they claimed to have these networks inside Iraq, and that was all a lie. There were no networks inside Iraq.
After that, you moved to Pakistan after 9/11, right? How was that?
Yeah, maybe 9/11. Yes, I moved to Pakistan. Yeah.
I'm guessing you're more open. How was operating there? Because they are a U.S. ally, but it's also like there are a lot of Al Qaeda people were in there too. Is that like risky being in Pakistan, or are you safe around the sea?
Oh no. It was very risky. Listen, I'll preface this by saying that my tour in Pakistan was 100% positive. I loved it. I loved the people. I loved the history and the food and the culture, and the work was fascinating.
The government.
All around. The government at the time was very, very pro-American. It was General Musharraf, the Pakistani intelligence service was tougher, right? So the guys that I worked with were awesome, 100% awesome. I loved these guys. Even after I left the CIA, we stayed in touch just to say hello. But the problem is, well, the guys that I was dealing with had all been educated at Sandhurst. They were all pro-American. They spoke English as well as I do. And, everything was great. But the same Pakistani intelligence service, the ISI, they're the ones who created the Kashmiri separatist groups. They're the ones that armed the Taliban. They were the ones that worked with terrorist groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed, for example. And so you had to be careful. So the guys that I was dealing with, 100% awesome. Met their families, went to their homes. Everything was great. And but their colleagues weren't so great. Their colleagues were actively dangerous. And it's just something that you had to get used to dealing with.
I'm guessing when you say colleagues, you mean like their heads, or like just like they had people all around? Okay.
I mean, they're like working level colleagues. Yeah. Because don't forget, not everybody in the Pakistani intelligence service is there to serve the Americans, right? A lot of them are there to arm the Kashmiris. A lot of them are there to kill Indians. A lot of them are there to give the Taliban their marching orders. So it's complicated. There are just lots of different necessities at play.
Okay, so I guess since you know about this conflict, because it seems like a lot of Pakistan's focus has been India. Did you get that feeling when you were there, or was it
100%? And then after we completed the Abu Zubaydah operation, just because these guys were just such awesome guys, the commander, Brigadier General Mohammed, he said, "Hey, we want to do something fun. So don't plan any work for like next Tuesday," or whatever it was. And I said, "Okay, great." So he takes us to the border with India. There's this border crossing about 20 miles east of Lahore. And it's not a regular normal border crossing. It's very, very ceremonial. So they're not wearing the guys on both sides marching guard duty. They're not regular border guards. So they're wearing these uniforms with big hats with big feathers on them and bright colors, and their guns aren't real guns. They're like parade guns. And
they walk like marching.
Yeah, they march back and forth, and then when they get like this close to each other, they pull the guns on each other.
Oh, wow.
And then real slowly they put the gun back on their shoulder, and then they continue the march. It's all ceremonial. It's all just for show. And I started laughing. I said, "General, what is this?" And he said, "We do this ceremony every day, 24 hours a day, to remind us of how much we hate the Indians." And I started laughing. And I said, "Well, then, and the Indians do this to remind themselves of how much they hate you." And he says, yes, now you get it. I'm like, okay, if that's how you want to spend your day.
So this was a guy who was like friendly with Americans, right? But the focus was still India, even in that situation. Like,
well, he's the head of the Pakistani intelligence service.
Okay,
that
makes sense.
On the one hand, his job is to help the Americans catch the Al Qaeda people. On the other hand, his bigger job is protecting his own country from Indian spies.
Everyone knew Pakistan was like a big base for CIA, right? Like after 2001.
At the time, yeah. I mean, it was public knowledge.
Why were like all these Al Qaeda people running into Pakistan when they lost in Afghanistan? Was it just convenience? Borders right there, so you have to go hide somewhere.
We were bombing them into the Stone Age in Afghanistan. We bombed a cave one day when I was there, and a guy came stumbling out and he was bleeding from both of his ears. And he's just like, I give up. So it's either run to Pakistan and try to save yourself, or the Americans are going to blow you into 1,000 pieces and your family's not going to be able to put you back together again.
That makes sense, right? Which was like borders, right? They couldn't go anywhere else. Or was it like they thought Pakistan was safer out of all the other countries?
Well, we weren't bombing Pakistan.
Yeah.
And there's nowhere else to go. Unless you want to go to Iran, and the Iranians are going to either arrest you or kill you. So it's up to you. You got yourself into this position in the first place, so take your choice. Pakistan, where the Americans are going to catch you and send you to Guantanamo. Afghanistan, where the Americans are going to blow you up. Or Iran, where the Iranians are going to arrest you and kill you. You know, I always used to say, and I've said this for years, if you are an Arab in Pakistan with no passport and no plausible explanation for what you're doing there, you're going to Guantanamo. That's it.
Yeah.
I had guys, I'm like, where are you from? Egypt. What are you doing here? Where's your passport? I don't have a passport. I lost it in a taxi. I said, that's the 6th time I've heard that today. Like the entire Egyptian community in Pakistan, all of their passports are in some random taxi somewhere. What are you doing here? One guy said, I came here to learn Arabic. I said, you're an Arab. You speak Arabic. They don't speak Arabic in this country. He just sat there and looked at me like, okay, Guantanamo.
What about these reports? And I wonder if you think there's any truth to it. Saddam's base was like extremely close to the military base. Does that hint at anything?
Base?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah,
you know, the Pakistanis have denied this for years and years. But yeah, you know, let's just be truthful about it. Elements of the Pakistani intelligence service, the Pakistani government, the Pakistani military were sympathetic to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. So yeah, I don't think he got to Abbottabad, which is the west point of Pakistan, by accident. And look at it this way. You know, Pakistanis put walls around their houses, just like the Arabs do. And the walls are usually 6 feet. If you have money, they may be 8 feet, right? Because they don't want you to see their women. They don't want you to see their family life, whatever. It's for privacy. The walls around Osama bin Laden's house were 20 feet. Nobody in Pakistan has a house with 20-foot walls around it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was meant to protect him from the prying eyes of the United States. So yeah, I always believed that elements of the Pakistani government were working with bin Laden. Not the Pakistani government. Yeah. Elements of the Pakistani government.
Did that mean like there were operational steps you had to take when you were there? Was that like the belief CIA had when we were there? Okay.
Oh,
like just sharing information.
Yeah. Oh, no. Security was of the utmost importance. I wanted to believe that my Pakistani colleagues were being honest with me. But in order to protect myself, you have to believe that nobody's honest. Your security is dependent on yourself and your tradecraft. You can't just trust the Pakistanis to, protect you and not kill you.
Which I guess you think about that, right? Like when someone's trying to get close to you, or you are close with someone. Let's say, you were there for a few years, right? Like you just, like you talk to people, you feel like you have a friendship. Does that always in the back of your mind, like, oh, he could be doing what I was trained to do with other people, with me?
Of course. They're all professional intelligence officers. Their job is to spy on you, just like your job is to spy on them. Now, you're cooperating on this Al-Qaeda thing, but you're still spying on each other.
Okay, since we're talking about spying on agencies, I know you know a lot about Mossad, and I want to get a little bit into that. And I don't want to misquote you anywhere, right? But you have said, and you can provide context just to clarify the quote, because I'm just paraphrasing it. CIA and Mossad don't get along. Is that a CIA Mossad thing? But then again, we just talked about other agencies are getting along. Is it like most agencies just don't get along with other agencies?
No. Actually, most agencies do get along with other agencies. We don't get along with Mossad because they're constantly spying on us. And we, as a policy in the United States, we do not spy on Israel. We don't. Period. They actively and aggressively spy on us.
And I know you've said that. Is that official, or is that like you're just told that? Like, is that in the law books or something?
In the law books, that what
Not
do you
law
mean?
books. Like is that written somewhere, or you every officer like go through training? You're like, oh, hey, we can't spy on the Mossad. We can't spy on the Mossad. Or is that something you learned? Like you bring up some information to your higher ups, and they're like, oh, we can't use that information because that's against the law. Like you bring up something on Mossad or something. Like how do you learn that's the
No,
policy? That's
no,
what.
no, no. There's no law that says that Congress never passed a law saying
Yeah,
you can't spy on Israel.
that would
It's
be like
not up
excessive,
to
especially right now.
yeah, it's not up to Congress to decide who the CIA spies on.
It's the
No.
CIA head.
Yeah, it's the CIA and the operational divisions.
How much does like the focus of CIA change when we see administration change, and like the new head gets appointed and then confirmed through the Senate? How much does the day-to-day change?
It doesn't. The CIA every year comes up with something called an OD, an operating directive, and the ODs don't change from administration to administration, except for maybe minor little fiddles around the edges. So, for example, it goes from tier 0, which means they're coming over the embassy wall, to tier 5, which means don't pay any attention. So, for example, tier 0 is, let's say, the Iranian nuclear program. Tier 1 would be Chinese technology. Tier 2 would be Middle Eastern terrorism. Tier 3 would be like, I don't know. I'm just making these up. The Ukrainian wheat harvest. Tier 4 would be who's going to win the French election. Nobody cares. And tier 5 is, environmental protection in the Caribbean or something. So that's not going to change because they're not based on what administrations are interested in. They're based on what the national interests of the United States are. And that doesn't change from one president to another.
For sure. What does change when the head changes?
Well, that's a good question, actually. There are little things. For example, when Donald Trump was elected, he had Marco Rubio declare the Mexican drug cartels to be terrorist groups. Okay, now the reason they did that was budgetary. So if you declare something to be a terrorist group, it frees up money from a separate budget that you can then spend to counter it. It doesn't mean we're going to invade Mexico. It doesn't mean we're going to attack. We're going to send the military to attack the Mexican drug cartels. Nothing like that. All it does is it frees up money to implement new programs. Right? So that is a change. But otherwise, very, very little changes. Very little.
I know you talked about Mossad spying on CIA. Are they doing that with other agencies? And spying is one thing. Influence, that's probably not coming from Mossad, right? That's coming from other sources. Because spying and influence, I wonder if you see that as difference or no.
Yeah, I see that as different. Yes. Yeah, spying, Mossad spies on everybody. Everybody. Because you know how I said, you got to worry about yourself and your own security? Well, the Israelis take that to the nth degree. They really believe that they are utterly alone in the world. And so they'll spy on everybody. In terms of policy, there are policies on which we can agree with other intelligence services, including the Israelis. So there are things that not only do we agree with the Israelis, but we'll help them on. The Israelis occasionally will help us on something, like a duty to warn. But
do they have that? Just asking. I don't know if you know.
Not officially like we do. Ours is official. It's an actual law. But they will come to us sometimes when it's in their interest to say, look, you've got a problem in XYZ country. I maintain, and I believe this actually very much, that the Israelis knew about 9/11 They probably had sources inside Al Qaeda, but they wanted us to be attacked so that we would have to go to the Middle East and fight wars that benefit Israel. Right? They wanted Saddam Hussein out. We took him out. They wanted Syria out. The Syrians are done. They wanted Iran to be just destroyed. Well, we bombed Iran recently. We helped them with that too. So that's really what the Israeli goal is.
What with Iran, I've actually heard about that, and there was an interesting report that came out after the bombing where this operation has been going on for not operation, like the studying of the bunkers and how the air vents were set up. So we put the bomb in the air vents, and is that CIA that's carrying out? Someone was studying this structure for 20 years, which is insane.
24 different intelligence services are looking at that.
That is insane. You don't agree with the Iran bombing, or you don't agree with the? I'm trying to understand your argument because it does make sense, right? We wouldn't want more people to have nukes, or
look at it this way.
yeah.
Look at it this way. The JCPOA was working, right? It was working. The Joint Collective Plan of Action. The Iraqi nuclear sites were subject to spot inspections. The Iranians cooperated on those inspections. Nuclear sites were sealed with lead seals. They were undisturbed. And the United Nations IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, set up cameras that were unmolested and were all functioning. This is exactly the same setup that we had with Iraq. Exactly the same. It was working. Besides that, the CIA wrote 3 separate national intelligence estimates saying that the Iranians were not building a bomb. So why fuck with it? You don't trust your own intelligence? We knew what the intelligence was. We were confident in the intelligence. We knew the Iranians weren't building a bomb, but we bombed Iran just because the Israelis wanted us to. Listen, all the years that I was at the CIA, every single time, I mean this quite literally, every single time Benjamin Netanyahu came to the United States, no matter who the president was, he begged us to bomb Iran. And every president said, no, 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 no. Donald Trump says, okay, and he bombs Iran. Now, his position is he didn't want to bomb Iran, but Netanyahu said, well, if you don't bomb Iran, we're going to use a nuclear weapon. And he did it to stop them from using a nuclear weapon. That's probably true. But then don't you think that means we should slap the Israelis down a peg or two and say, no, you're not bombing anybody. Relax.
Yeah, which is, I guess, the Iran stuff, that is complicated because based on my research, it seems like they weren't building the bomb, but they were enriching uranium to dangerous levels.
Which they were perfectly allowed to do under international law.
That high, though, that's the thing, right? There was a 60%, which is higher than what you need for nuclear energy. That's the one.
Well, they did it because we unilaterally pulled out of the JCPOA. They said, oh, okay, you're going to pull out of the deal and you're going to put more sanctions on us? Fine. Then what we're going to do is we're going to enrich to 65 or 70% or 90%.
Negotiating leverage. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
We were the ones, Sam, who broke that agreement. Not the Iranians.
Yeah. Another thing, I wonder how you look at the recent bombing of Qatar, because I feel like the war just keeps expanding in the Middle East, and it seems
this is a major foreign policy failure for the United States. In 2002, the Qataris approached us, and they asked us if we would move our naval headquarters from Bahrain to Qatar. And we said, no, we've been in Bahrain since the 70s. We love the Bahrainis. They love us. We're going to stay there. And then the Qataris said, okay, how about if we build you the world's largest Air Force base and you can just have it? We said, great, we'll take it. So that's Rashid Air Base. Our relationship with the Qataris is like this. We're like brothers until the Israelis get involved. And so we now know that President Trump lied when he said that the Israelis did. Yeah, and the Israelis didn't give us advance warning. It's like, of course the Israelis gave us advance warning. We just elected to place the Israelis over our relationship with Qatar. And so now, not only have the Qataris said, well, wait a minute, we thought we were friends, and you allowed the Israelis to bomb our sovereign territory, and you knew in advance and didn't tell us? So now the Qataris are like reassessing their relationship with the United States. Do they really need to have this giant airbase on their territory? What do they get out of it? They don't get anything out of it if the Israelis can just come in and bomb anytime they please.
Yeah. And
so this is a major foreign policy failure for the United States.
Well, so many different issues are arising because of that, right? First of all, this is just like personal curiosity. We have air defenses there. We couldn't, I guess, if we knew, we didn't want to shoot it down. So that's like, because there was also a whole debate going on, like, oh, our air defense is getting like, they're getting outdated or something. Like, how could we not stop this?
Yeah, we could. We chose not to.
For sure. And the Air Force, the base debate, I got to read more into this. But the other one is, did you see the Saudi-Pakistan signing like the NATO-like nuclear pact? That has to do with the Qatar, right? Saudis, like, if Israel is just doing everyone.
No. This was years in negotiations.
Okay.
Yeah, but the thing is it's just paper, because the Saudis and the Pakistanis have had the closest possible military relationship anyway since the 50s.
That makes sense. And now they have the nuclear shield. Do they have the nuclear shield? Because they go back and forth. I see the comments. Yes, next day they're like, oh no. Yeah.
No, there's no nuclear shield because the Pakistanis don't have a delivery capability. They've got this nuclear bomb. What do you attach it to? How do you deliver it?
You're talking about missiles, right? That's the thing. I wonder how much you followed the India-Pakistan war.
Yeah,
like, what was your read of? Because, like, this is just my opinion. Pakistan was like punching way above their weight, which is like, just economically speaking, they did very well, right?
Without a doubt.
That was China was there. So if they don't have a delivery capability, you don't think China could get it to them?
No, that would be such an incredible violation of international law. The Chinese would never get bogged down in something like that.
And just sharing the technology instead of giving a missile?
No. The North Koreans, okay.
Yeah.
But the Chinese live, like civilized society. No, you can't just, here, let me give you my missile. Because then what happens if there's a coup and then they use your missile against you?
Which has been an issue a couple of times, because Pakistan has had a lot of like economic issues where they needed bailouts. So the reason they keep getting it, many people argue, is because they have the nukes. We don't want to, just have a rogue state. Now we could end it on some quick fire questions. What was this like a successful operation? Just doesn't have to be CIA. That like people don't talk as much about. Of course, there's the beeper one, but something that people don't talk about.
You see, this is the thing: is that the CIA,
you can't share.
It's the failures that become public. It's the successes that remain secret. You can't talk about the successes.
Okay, that makes sense. I was giving you a break. Maybe you would keep going.
Yeah.
But which failure is like same question, I guess. No, for sure. Same question. Which failure like people don't talk as much about?
Failure?
Yeah.
They don't talk as much about? I mean, people have written PhD dissertations on CIA failures. There are volumes and volumes of books out there. I mean, just pick up Legacy of Ashes by Wiener. It's 1,000 pages of CIA failures.
But yeah, I know you have a book coming out. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, I've written 8 books, and the first 7 were about the CIA, and I decided to do something completely different. And I wrote a book called Remains of the Day, The Definitive Guide to Washington, D.C.'s Historic Cemeteries. This is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it was important to me. It's the first book that's ever been written about the historic cemeteries of Washington, D.C. And then the publisher liked it so much, he commissioned 4 more. I'm going to do one I'm finishing one on the mafia graves of New York City. Then I've got the historic cemeteries of Chicago, and then the country western graves of Nashville and then I've got one on America's most notorious serial killers. So the Washington D.C. one comes out in mid-October. Remains of the Day.
Well, yeah,
It took forever, this book. I mean, not to write. I wrote it in 6 weeks. And it normally takes me 9 months to write a book. This one I wrote in 6 weeks, but then,
that's
COVID and then the Chinese paper shortage, and it's just one issue after the other.
6 weeks is impressive. How long were you writing every day?
Oh, I would do my radio show in the morning, and I would go home and just start writing. And there were a couple of times where I remember writing and looking up at the clock and saying 6 o'clock, I should probably get something to eat. And then I keep writing, and then I look up and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh my God, I got to go to bed. Yeah.
That's impressive, though. That is impressive. I haven't worked like that.
Oh man, once you get rolling on something like that, you just can't stop yourself.
Perfect. Yeah, and I know I have a lot more questions that I gotta research because you just been around so much. We didn't even talk about your Congress. You were part of the special committee and stuff. Like we can get
the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Yeah.
Yeah. So all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of important points. I guess we could do it in the future.